Hey guys, I want to introduce you to a really useful pattern in game programming. In fact, it's one of the chapters of a great book called Game Programming Patterns, which is in your further reading. And that pattern is called the observer pattern. So in abstract terms, this is what happens. We have some subject that we're interested in knowing about. In our case, it's going to be the camera raycaster. And we have one or more observers, like the player movement or like the cursor affordances. And what we want to happen is we want the observers to be able to subscribe to that subject and find out when something interesting happens. So the subject wants to be able to send both an execution flow and data flow to those observers. It wants to notify the observers, hey, something's happened and this is what's happened. So a little paragraph here, observers register to listen to events on the subject without the subject knowing or caring who's listening. So that's an important thing. The subject, the thing they're subscribing to, doesn't know or care who's listening. It just provides a mechanism for new observers to register themselves. So if another class comes along down here, observer 2, you don't actually have to make any changes to the code of subject in order to be notified about these events, which is pretty cool, right? So let's take that a little bit into the concrete with our camera raycaster. And let's look at the old way of doing things versus the new way. And we're going to end up doing both, actually. But the yellow stuff on the left-hand side of this diagram is the new observer pattern. So let's firstly talk about what's happening in player movement. Player movement is asking camera raycaster through the getter, camera raycaster.layer hit. Remember we wrote that getter. It's saying to the camera raycaster, what layer hit do you have at the moment? What's the current value of layer hit? And as a dashed arrow to indicate data flow, there's a little key for you down the bottom left here, camera raycaster comes back and just sends the data back. Well, this is the layer hit that I currently have stored, right? And that's okay, because we only click, in the case of the player, we only click every now and then. So the camera raycaster is not being bombarded with these sort of requests, and it's all simple and clear. But with the cursor affordance, we've got the camera raycaster frantically raycasting all the time, because it kind of needs to, because we need to know if in the last frame we went over the boundary from an enemy layer to a walkable layer or vice versa, for example. So the camera raycaster needs to be going 20 to the dozen round and round like that, raycasting all the time. But what it doesn't need to be doing, we don't need to have cursor affordance also going 20 to the dozen every frame, asking what layer have you hit, what have you hit, what have you hit? And it's like, and if you keep doing this and you keep adding components, we're going to be having so many method calls going on every frame, it's crazy. But also, remember the logic inside the camera affordance, the cursor affordance rather, was to ask every frame and then set the cursor every frame, and that's causing us a bug. Remember that? The bug is drifting. The cursor is drifting because we're setting the cursor every single frame. We only care when the camera raycaster notices a change in layer, when the cursor goes from one layer to being over a different layer. So what we really want to happen is in the cursor affordance class, we want to be able to, instead of say in update or late update or anything else, any frame-based message, we want to say on layer change. We want a whole new method to be only called when the camera raycaster notices a change of layer. And then you get two things happening in the same direction. You get the execution flow, the camera raycaster calls the on layer change method, and along with it, it optionally passes some data, like the new layer. It may as well just pass the new layer while it's at it, right? So that's what we want. We wanted to be able to reverse this dependency so that the camera raycaster doesn't need to know anything about the existence of cursor affordance whatsoever. And we want to be able to add as many other things like cursor affordance, like a sound. Maybe when you hover over loot, it makes a clinkling sound, or you hover over an enemy, it shows the enemy name in the UI. But we want to be able to add that functionality without changing camera raycaster at all. And the only way to do that is to use something called delegates in C#. Well, there's another way. We could use Unity's send message system, and we could use horrible string referenced method names and stuff, but then we'd go balmy and make lots of mistakes. So let's all grow up, put our grown-up C# hats on, and learn a little bit about delegates. So that's going to be the subject of the next video. What are delegates? How do we use them in C#? So your challenge for this video, on the belief that you only really learn anything when you're doing something, is to explain why this is a helpful paradigm. Pop over to the lecture discussions, explain why this is helpful in your own words, not just parroting what I've said. And be brave. Look, if you're not really sure why this would be helpful at this stage, say so. That's useful feedback for us. If you are sure and you just want to express it in your own terms, please do so. Other students will help you out. And then we will go ahead and implement in the next lecture. I just want to see what your understanding of what I've just said at this stage. Now remember, there's also some further reading. I've given you a link here to Game Programming Patterns. It's a book that I encourage you to buy as an actual physical book so Robert makes some money from it, but in the meanwhile you can You can read it for free on the web. And the second thing is that you can start your delving into the documentation, if you wish, over on MSDN and its documentation about delegates. But I'm going to be taking you through it step by step in the next video, and I look forward to seeing you there.